In a land where the sun sets upon kingdoms rich in tradition and honor, two brothers walk the same path, but stand worlds apart. Bound by blood, divided by fate, their choices will shape the destiny of Ajegunle. This is the tale of love, loss, and redemption, where shadows of the past collide with the light of truth. In the peaceful village of Elida, Sukura and Lasisu lived a quiet life. They had twin sons, Jabari and Zuberi, who were now 10 years old. Their life was simple and filled with love. One day, war broke out between Elida and a neighboring kingdom. With a shortage of warriors, the king ordered that all able-bodied men, regardless of age, join the army. The news struck Lasisu like thunder. Knowing his sons would soon be summoned, he hurried home. "Take the boys and leave through the back door," he whispered urgently to his wife, who was sobbing. "Let's go together," she pleaded, but Lasisu shook his head. "If I go with you, they'll find us easily. I'll stay behind and buy you time." At that moment, the village chiefs knocked on their door. Lasisu kissed his wife and sons goodbye and stepped outside. "Where are your sons?" one chief demanded. "They're not here," Lasisu lied. But as they spoke, one of the guards spotted Lasisu's wife and children fleeing in the distance. The guards chased after them but soon lost their trail. After days of running, Sukura and the twins arrived in Ajegunle, the town of Lasisu's brother. The uncle was shocked to see them and saddened to hear about the chaos in their village. He welcomed them into his home, promising to protect them. Months later, devastating news reached them. Lasisu had died in battle. Sukura wept for days, her heart breaking at the loss of her husband. Years passed, and the twins grew into strong young men in their early 20s. Life in Ajegunle was peaceful until conflict erupted between Ajegunle and the neighboring town of Ilupeju over a disputed piece of land. One fateful day, while playing by the riverside, the princess of Ajegunle was ambushed and kidnapped by warriors from Ilupeju. Her friends escaped and rushed to inform the king. For 2 weeks, chaos consumed the palace. Then, the Ilupeju king sent an ultimatum: surrender the disputed land, or the princess would die. After much deliberation, the king of Ajegunle summoned his chiefs. One chief proposed a bold plan: recruit 30 young men to rescue the princess, offering the reward of her hand in marriage and vast lands to the one who succeeded. The king agreed, and the announcement was made. Many young men, including Jabari and Zuberi, volunteered. Sukura was heartbroken at her son's decision, but was reassured by their uncle, who believed in their potential. Since more than 30 men volunteered, the king ordered weeks of grueling training to select the best. The training was brutal, testing their strength, agility, and endurance. Competitions were held, pitting the men against each other in mock battles. Jabari's quick thinking and Zuberi's strength earned them places among the final 30. On the day of departure, the young men were equipped with weapons and supplies. Tearful parents bid them farewell. As the group ventured into the wilderness, tragedy struck. Wild animals attacked, claiming the lives of several participants. Others fell to the harsh terrain and illnesses. By the time they reached Ilupeju weeks later, only 10 men remained. The group formulated a daring plan to rescue the princess, who was imprisoned in the heavily guarded palace. They split into 2 teams. Jabari led the infiltration team, tasked with sneaking into the palace, while Zuberi's team was to provide cover outside. On the night of the heist, Jabari's team silently eliminated several guards. They reached the princess, chained in a dark cell. As Jabari worked to free her, a guard discovered them and raised the alarm. chaos erupted. Zuberi's team engaged the palace guards but began to falter. Overwhelmed with fear, Zuberi fled, abandoning his comrades. Only 2 members of his team remained and were eventually killed. Inside the palace, Jabari and his team fought valiantly. 3 of them managed to escape with the princess. The Ilupeju king, enraged, ordered his guards to pursue Jabari and the princess at all costs. The chase was relentless. Jabari, the princess, and the 2 remaining warriors, Kore and Duka, slipped into the dense forest beyond Ilupeju's palace. Behind them, distant shouts of guards still echoed, but they had gained enough ground to disappear into the night. They moved swiftly, cutting through thickets and dodging low-hanging branches. The princess, though weary, kept pace beside Jabari, her once pristine gown now tattered and smeared with dirt. For hours they pressed on until the sounds of pursuit faded. As they rested beneath the canopy of a large baobab tree, Kor, the tallest of the warriors, spoke in hushed tones. "We're not safe yet. Ilupeju's hunters know these lands better than we do. They won't give up easily," he said, tightening his grip on his spear. Jabari nodded, scanning the trees. "We need to keep moving. We can rest properly at sunrise, but for now, we stay ahead of them." By dawn, they reached a shallow river. Mist hovered over the water's surface, and the air was thick with humidity. As they waded across, Jabari felt the weight of unseen eyes lurking in the trees. Halfway through the crossing, Kor froze, his hand darting up in signal. "We're not alone," he whispered. Suddenly, a volley of arrows cut through the air. Jabari shoved the princess to the ground just in time, shielding her with his body as the arrows struck the river, causing ripples to explode outward. From the opposite bank, Ilupeju warriors emerged from behind rocks, swords gleaming. "Run!" Jabari ordered. Kore and Duka charged forward, engaging the attackers to buy time. Jabari grabbed the princess's hand, pulling her through the water. Behind them, Duka's spear clashed against an enemy's blade. As they reached the opposite shore, Jabari turned in time to see Duka fall, pierced by an arrow. Kor, wounded but still fighting, struck down 2 warriors before another blade found his side. The princess cried, tugging at his arm, but Jabari couldn't tear his eyes away from Kor's last stand. "We must keep going. They didn't die for nothing." By midday, Jabari and the princess stumbled upon a small cavern hidden behind a curtain of vines. Exhausted, they collapsed against the cool stone walls. The princess's breathing was shallow, her body trembling from exhaustion. Jabari tore a piece of his cloak and soaked it in a small stream running along the cavern floor, gently pressing it to her forehead. "I never thought I'd owe my life to one of the king's warriors," she said softly, her voice cracking but laced with gratitude. "I'm no different from the others. I only wish to see you safe," Jabari replied, meeting her gaze. For the first time since their escape, the princess truly saw him, not just as a warrior, but as a person. His eyes, fierce in battle, now held a softness that lingered with unspoken words. "Why did you risk so much for me?" she asked after a moment of silence. Jabari hesitated. "Because I couldn't bear to see you suffer." The princess smiled faintly, brushing a stray braid from her face. "You're braver than you realize." As night fell and the forest hummed with life, the princess found herself leaning closer to Jabari, his steady presence a source of comfort she hadn't known she needed. The following morning, as sunlight streamed through the vines, a sudden rustling jolted them awake. Jabari rose, sword in hand, as 3 Ilupeju scouts approached the cavern. Jabari met them head-on, his strikes swift and precise. One scout lunged for the princess, but she grabbed a fallen branch and struck him across the face, buying Jabari enough time to dispatch the others. When the last scout fell, the princess's chest heaved with adrenaline. "You fight well for someone who's supposed to stay behind the lines," Jabari teased, helping her to her feet. She laughed softly, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You might make a warrior of me yet." As they left the cavern behind, the princess found her heart racing for reasons beyond fear. There was something about Jabari's unwavering dedication that stirred emotions she hadn't anticipated. Despite the danger, he shielded her from harm, shared his dwindling supplies, and carried her when she was too weak to walk. By the time they reached the outskirts of Ajegunle, exhausted and parched, they collapsed beneath a large tree. Jabari's breathing was shallow, his strength nearly gone. The princess, equally weak, rested her head on his shoulder, her eyelids heavy. As the sun began to set, Zuberi emerged from the shadows, his eyes narrowing as he saw them lying helpless beneath the tree. At first, he knelt beside Jabari, checking his pulse. His brother was alive, but barely conscious. Then his gaze shifted to the princess. Her breathing was light, and she drifted in and out of unconsciousness. Zuberi hesitated, torn between loyalty and greed. His brother had come this far, but the reward was meant for one. Slowly, Zuberi lifted the princess into his arms. She stirred faintly, but did not wake. "I'll come back for you," Zuberi whispered to Jabari, but he didn't. Zuberi carried the princess to the palace, crossing the gates at dusk. The guards rushed forward, and the king himself came to meet them. "You saved my daughter," the king proclaimed, his voice filled with relief. The princess, too weak, was taken to the healers. When she awoke, she remembered being carried, but in her dazed state, she never saw the face of her rescuer. To her, Jabari and Zuberi were indistinguishable. Zuberi was hailed as the hero of Ajegunle. The king rewarded him with land and the promise of marriage to the princess. Jabari awoke hours later beneath the same tree, alone and weak. His vision blurred as he called out, but there was no answer. A passing hunter found him slumped by the roadside and carried him back to Ajegunle, unaware of his identity. Jabari arrived in the village unnoticed, wearing simple clothing provided by the hunter. As he walked through the square, he saw Zuberi standing beside the princess, who was seated beside the king. Jabari froze, watching as his brother soaked in the admiration of the crowd. Days passed, and the princess gradually recovered. Zuberi often visited her, charming her with stories of the rescue. But something felt off. She remembered faintly the gentle way she was shielded during the ambush at the river, the quiet determination of the one who had protected her during the chase. This man felt different, more distant, less gentle. One day, while walking near the fields, the princess spotted a figure working among the farmers. Her heart skipped. From behind, he looked like Zuberi. "Zuberi!" she called. The man turned. It wasn't Zuberi. You're the one who saved me, aren't you?" she whispered, recognizing the kindness in his eyes. Jabari lowered his gaze, unsure of how to answer. The princess hurried back to the palace and demanded to speak with the king. "Father, the man who rescued me, I saw him today. It wasn't Zuberi." The king summoned Zuberi and Jabari to the palace. "Explain yourself," the king demanded. Zuberi, cornered by the truth, confessed to leaving his brother behind. "I found them outside the village. Jabari was too weak, and I brought the princess back alone," Zuberi admitted, his voice trembling. The king's eyes narrowed. "You abandoned your brother to die. yet you stand here and accept praise?" The king, angered by the betrayal, ordered Zuberi to be cast into the wild bush, a punishment for his deceit. Jabari, on the other hand, was honored in front of the entire kingdom. The princess approached him, her eyes soft with gratitude. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said. "I owe you my life." At the grand ceremony, Jabari was rewarded with land and the hand of the princess in marriage. Though Sukura rejoiced in her son's triumph, her heart carried the weight of Zuberi's exile. "May he find his way back one day," she whispered softly. As for Jabari and the princess, they ruled Ajegunle with kindness, wisdom, and compassion. Sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not with swords, but with the choices we make and the strength we find within. Jabari's story teaches us that integrity and kindness will always shine through the shadows of betrayal. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more powerful stories and timeless lessons.